Joining us now is Lauren Azoury. She is the Park Naturalist Supervisor at West Bloomfield Parks, joining us on the Megacast as we begin Pollinator Week 2022. Lauren, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate having you on. So, of course, as I mentioned, next week is Pollinator Week 2022 all over Earth. For those who are not familiar, besides bees, what are some other living things and so on that are considered pollinators, and what service do they provide to our natural landscapes?
Yeah, it's so great that pollinators are getting more and more attention because they are really crucial to our food consumption as humans, but also crucial to our ecosystem as a whole. So yeah, bees get the best advertisement, I feel like. A lot of people realize that bees are pollinators, but not just honeybees. We have lots of native bee species here in Michigan, and as well as hummingbirds can be pollinators, butterflies are pollinators. In some parts of the world, bats are pollinators, not our Michigan ones, but in other parts of the world. And sometimes even ants can pollinate. So usually in the insect and most insects are thought of as pollinators more so, but yeah, in other parts of the world, bats can be, so can hummingbirds. So lots of different pollinators out there that help us spread seeds.
And so what makes pollinators so vital to our ecosystems, especially at this time of the year as plant life is beginning to bloom and going into the summer season is really having that vitality it doesn't quite have during the winter season? How important are pollinators in all of that?
Yeah, so pollinators help plants to continue to reproduce and grow. So if you don't have a bee or another pollinator visit a flower and then cross-pollinate to another flower and transfer that pollen, that flower will not turn into the fruit that it produces. So here in Michigan, our cherry production and our apple production is all thanks to pollinators. In parts of the world where pollinators are low because of pollution or habitat loss, they hire people to take a paintbrush and actually transfer pollen from one to the other to produce fruit. But our paintbrushes aren't made for that. Like, nature designed pollinators for that important job of transferring pollen to create new plants and fruit. Or vegetables or whatever that flower might be producing, or more seeds. So they're Mother Nature made them that way. So their bodies are made to collect these things. A lot of bees have special spots on the back legs that are pollen sacs, and they are much more productive than humans can be in trying to produce fruit and vegetables. So 1 in every 3 bites of food that you probably take needed a pollinator. Like, a pollinator needed to pollinate that plant in order to produce that food that we were consuming as humans.
We're joined by Lauren Azoury. She is the Park Naturalist Supervisor at West Bloomfield Parks, joining us on the Michigan Megacast. More information on West Bloomfield Parks, including their nature room and other nature activities, can be found on wbparks.org. That's wbparks.org for more information from West Bloomfield Parks. And during the month of May, last month, many people across the state of Michigan and around the country participated in what was called the Nomo May campaign. We know that particularly because so many mowers are gas-powered and emit those greenhouse gases, that's a factor that played into why people would participate in the Nomo May campaign. But they also affected our pollinators, too, as we were getting into the thick of the spring season. How did Nomo May benefit those pollinators in our ecosystems?
Yeah, it was great to see that really taking momentum this year more than previous years. Nomo May is a great campaign to help pollinators, especially as they're emerging from their hibernation state from the winter. They need those nectar sources. So all pollinators drink nectar, and nectar can come from all different kinds of flowers. But in the early spring, as you know, there's not very many flowers up. But our grass, if it's not fertilized and pesticized, our grass will produce lots of great nectar sources. Dandelions is one of them. Clover is a huge one. So those are sources that we just decide that green is, just short green grass is what was culturally considered beautiful in the past. And I think Nomo May, the idea is to change people's minds that it doesn't have to be this green manicured lawn. That's really a landfill. A green manicured lawn provides no habitat or any good runoff surfaces as well. Like, it doesn't help grab water or help with stormwater runoff. So Nomo May was great because it helped flowers to continue to grow that would have normally been mowed, which provides early nectar sources for pollinators. But I hope that the trend continues throughout the season, because it's not just May. I'm not saying don't mow your lawn, but there's other amazing things we can do to help pollinators out. And that includes maybe removing a small part of our grass and turning it into a native plant garden. which will provide nectar sources for our pollinators year round. So you can plant something that blooms early spring and then plant something that blooms in the fall, and you'll help pollinators throughout the whole season in your grass or in your garden. So Nomo May is a great campaign. It definitely saves on energy, definitely provides great early nectar sources for our pollinators, but also, and other things to remember, is that we can keep doing this throughout the season. And that's kind of what Pollinator Week's all about. So next week, June 20th, kicks off Pollinator Week, and just kind of bringing to light the importance of pollinators and what we can do to help them.
We're joined by Azoury, Park Naturalist Supervisor at West Bloomfield Parks, joining us on the Michigan Megacast. More information on wbparks.org for events and activities and just more helpful learning information and learning materials as well. wbparks.org is where you can find all of that. And so in Oakland County and in the West Bloomfield area, what are some resources or places people can go if they'd like to learn more about pollinators or even see them in action and see some of the work that they're doing?
Yeah, we actually have a few events coming up surrounding this to help educate our community members ourselves here. So we have a Pollinator Festival on August 27th. It's free for everyone at Marshbank Park. There'll be some great presentations from our conservation partners, Bees in the D, learning more about the importance of bees, as well as some sweep netting, where you take a net in the fields at our parks and look for pollinators and look at them closely and learn about them with a naturalist. So that's a good hands-on event to learn about. But the Pollinator Partnership is the group that started the whole Pollinator Week. So they've got some great resources on their website as well. And depending on the age of your family members that want to learn about pollinators, we do have a pollinator story time. So adults can learn along with their children at our beehives that we host with Bees in the D at Carner Farm. So we won't be going right into the hives with the little ones, but we'll be standing outside them, learning about them and watching them from far, and then reading some stories and to help us learn more about pollinators. So lots of fun programs coming up around Pollinator Week. And then Pollinator Partnership is a great organization that really started the whole Pollinator Week. So that's a great resource as well.
Lauren, across southeastern Michigan, and particularly in your area, in the West Bloomfield area, so often this time of year we are seeing the occurrence of snapping turtles and snapping turtle eggs and nests on our trailways and in some of our natural areas. What about this time of the year makes this when the snapping turtles would be laying their eggs or producing those nests, and why in trail areas do we typically see so many snapping turtle nests and occurrences of these animals?
Yeah, this is good observation, Tyler. This is definitely that time of year. So if you enjoy our West Bloomfield Trail Network, which is like a Rails to Trails, it's a linear trail that runs through the township. There's a lot of wetlands adjacent to it. So snapping turtles spend their whole life in the water, and they only leave this time of year, and it's just the females. So the females leave the wetlands and leave the water this time of year to lay their eggs. If you're looking for snapping turtles, I do have a shell here to kind of show you what it might look like. They're the largest turtle we have in Michigan, and the end of their shell where the tail comes out has these points rather than being nice and rounded. So that's one distinguishing feature from other turtles, so you can know the difference if you see them. But they are looking for suitable habitat to lay their nests, and they look for sunny and sandy places. So along our trail network, there's a lot of sand and gravel, as well as a lot of sunshine. So it's a great habitat for them to put their eggs. They lay up to 40 or 50 eggs at a time. They cover them all up, and it takes about 90 days for them to incubate. Their eggs look kind of like a ping pong ball. So they're about the exact same shape and size as color as a ping pong ball. And it's kind of cool. This is a really fun nature fact. Depending on the temperature of incubation for those snapping turtle eggs, if they incubate at around 68 degrees, those turtles will become females when they hatch. If they incubate around 70 to 72, it might be a mixture of both males and females. And if they incubate higher, up to the 75-degree range, those will hatch as males. So nature's pretty cool that way.
Yeah, very interesting fact that I didn't know about. I'm sure many other Michiganders watching this and listening to this haven't learned about either. So we're joined by Lauren Azoury. She's the Park Naturalist Supervisor at West Bloomfield Parks, joining us on the Megacast. More information on wbparks.org, including information on their August 27th Pollinator Festival. That'll happen on Saturday in partnership with organizations such as Bees in the D at Marshbank Park in West Bloomfield, Michigan. And going back to the turtle issue, we see so often on social media videos of people helping turtles crossing the street, or a bunch of cars stopping to let turtles cross the street. If someone encounters a turtle crossing a road, do you recommend helping it? And if so, in what way can people best go about that?
Yeah, great question. This is definitely the time of year that not just snapping turtles are leaving their wetland habitats to lay eggs, but other, like our Michigan's turtle, our state reptile is this painted turtle, and we found some of those just the other day in our back parking lot. So yes, you can definitely help a turtle if it's safe for you to do so with traffic. You want to make sure that you help the turtle cross in the direction it was already pointed. So you don't want to turn them around and go the opposite direction for two reasons. One, they'll get very confused. And also that they're just going to try to cross again. So you're not really truly helping them. So you want to cross them or help them cross the road in the direction they're already headed. And then when it comes to snapping turtles, obviously you want to keep yourself and the snapping turtle safe. Oftentimes you'll see people picking up a snapping turtle by the tail. Please do not do that. They have a lot of bones in their tail, and it is easy to break their tail if you do that. If you're going to help a snapping turtle, the best thing to do is have something in your trunk, like a little shovel or a big blanket or and things like that to help you grab onto it and move it across. Snapping turtles do have a really long neck, so they can actually extend their neck around to the back of their tail. So you still do have to be aware of your fingers and placement of that in order to keep yourself safe as well. But yeah, snapping turtles, they're doing a lot of hard work right now laying all those eggs, and we want to have more of them. They're scavengers, so they kind of eat all the dead things. They eat other things as well, but they help keep our wetlands clean. So they do have an important role in the food chain and in our ecosystem. So anything you can do to help a turtle cross the road during nesting season is appreciated. Just keep it going in the direction it was already headed.
We're joined by Lauren Azoury, the Parks Naturalist Supervisor at West Bloomfield Parks, joining us on the Michigan Megacast. Lauren, summer is also a time where so many people will be off walking on the trails or walking in nature, and often they're encountering poison ivy or poison oak. Can you explain to us what both of those look like and what happens when someone does come in contact with poison ivy or poison oak?
Yeah, so first I'll start by saying I always, a lot of things in nature get a bad rap, and poison ivy is definitely one of them. It is a native plant, so it does belong here and is part of our ecosystem here. And it does produce berries in the fall that are a food source for our local wildlife. So it does have its time and place, and it is important. But obviously people don't like it as much because it has this urushiol, which is like an oil, and that oil is what people react to. Their oil is what causes the scratching and the blisters that might be caused depending on if you are allergic or not. So not everybody has a reaction to poison ivy or poison oak. A lot like a bee sting, it just varies on your genetics and your, how you react to it yourself. We actually do not have, so Tyler, you mentioned poison ivy and poison oak. In Michigan, there is no poison oak. It is not a species that we have in here. It's not on the range map. Poison oak usually grows along the coasts, west and east coasts in those states, but we don't have poison oak here to worry about. So that's one thing you can check off the list. But for poison ivy, I'm sure most of you have heard, the leaves of 3, let it be. But there are a fair amount of plants in Michigan that have 3 leaves, so that can be confusing sometimes. It often gets confused with wild raspberry. But the leaves of 3 for poison ivy, the middle leaf has 2 cutouts, 1 on each side, and then the side leaves look more like a mitten. And where they meet in the middle is usually a red stem. Poison ivy can grow on the ground as a singular plant with 1 stem and 3 leaves, or it can grow up a tree or up something as a vine. And the vine of poison ivy is hairy. So one phrase we like to use to help people remember is if it's hairy, it's scary. So if you see a hairy vine with little rootlings that are kind of fuzzy on the side, that's probably poison ivy. And again, you're allergic to the oils. So the oils can be in poison ivy year round. So you can get poison ivy even in the winter. And if it touches your dog's fur and you pet your dog, the oil can be transferred to you. And it's in the leaves, the stem, as well as the vine. So it's in all parts. So if you ever think you might be in contact with poison ivy, the best thing to do is to wash with cold water. Warm water opens our pores and allows the oil that we have reactions to go deeper into our skin. So cold water. And then oftentimes people recommend like a good dish soap like Dawn, because that's meant to cut grease and oil. And so it will help wash that away as quick as possible.
We're joined by Lauren Azoury, the West Bloomfield Parks Naturalist Supervisor, joining us on the Michigan Megacast. More information on their website, wbparks.org. That's wbparks.org. And you mentioned that poison ivy is a native plant. If people find it in their yards or they find it on their property, should they remove it? Should they move it somewhere? Or should they let it be and just leave it off to the side and just kind of have a forewarning that, hey, this is in this area and I might be allergic?
Yeah. Right now in our park systems, if it's not on the trail where people are most often, we do not do anything to eradicate it. We let it grow. Obviously, if it's in an area that is a really high traffic area and could cause problems, we would remove it. But if it's in your yard in an area off to the side where you're not going to be at, you can definitely let it grow. If you are going to remove it, it is definitely a few things to remember. Do not burn. Poison ivy, if you burn it, the oil will go into the air and then you can breathe it and it will go into your lungs. So definitely not a safe choice there. They don't recommend mowing it either because the particles then go into the air. So the best thing to remove is either using, sometimes people recommend an herbicide, or to pull and dispose of the gloves that you're using when you pull. But there is companies that you can also contract with that are have a lot of great gear and are experienced at removing it. So if you have a really big problem in your backyard for poison ivy, you can have a company help you remove it. And then you can add all those great other native plants we talked about, right? Like you can add the goldenrod and the coneflower and the things that all of our pollinators like. So if you're going to remove it, just replace it with something else valuable in nature. Lauren,
thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate your time and your insight on so many different topics.
Thanks so much for having me. I love spreading the word about pollinators, and it's always fun to learn something new.